Fact is that for decades, after independence came, which would be post-World War II, many countries in the Arab and Muslim world, basically, even though the hope was that they would now be independent, develop their own government, and people expected that in fact the people who wound up being in power or seized power were often kings, military, or ex-military. And so many countries, for example, in the Arab world, Libya, Sudan, Egypt, Syria, Iraq. I mean, you can go on with countries had that background. Okay. Now, what's interesting there then is that their legitimacy wasn't based on being elected, and the way they enforced stability and security was through their military and their security forces. And regrettably, in many cases, where did they get their arms? Who trained them? Well, it might come from the Soviet Union, but it often came from the U.S. and from European powers. And so, for example, if you look at the U.S. role in a fair number of these, countries historically, whether it's Iran, whether it's Iraq, Egypt, Tunisia. I mean, we were supporting Mubarak of Egypt and Ben Ali right up until the last minute. And even when people were taking to the streets, you had contradictions coming out between the president and the Secretary of State. That is, they would both be talking about the other sides. So you had contradictory statements. At least it seemed that way. We were the people who were, with Egypt or Iran, we were training their military in the United States, not only there. We were providing them often with the weapons, with the planes, with the gunships that fired down on people. And so that's not forgotten. And what we did is buttress up these people, because even if we said technically they didn't fit the whole notion of America as a democracy that wants to support democracy, in the name of American interest, oil, security of Israel, stability, security in the region, that was the trade-off. We would support authoritarian rulers. When you do that, you're creating a situation which is very repressive, a situation where we say we stand up for democratic rights, democratic government, human rights, but we look the other way with those countries. So it looks like it's a double standard. And you're also creating a very fragile social situation, i.e., if people live, as many did in Mubarak, people in their late 20s, early 30s, all they would have known growing up was President Mubarak. And people older, all Egyptians pretty much, all they would have known is living under authoritarian governments, going back to Gamal Abdel Nasser, to Sadat, to Mubarak. Well, you don't exactly have a culture and values of democracy and institutions. So even when there's a move towards wanting, if you will, to overthrow the tyrant, part of the problem is you don't have in place, you've got to build the democratic institutions and the outlook and the attitude. Such basic things as functioning political parties, human rights, a free press, and government not manipulating that, accountability, transparency, all of those things are there. And one of the key things is there's never been a notion in most of these countries of loyal opposition. If you oppose the regime, you were seen as someone who should be imprisoned, someone who should be tortured, someone who should be shot. And so the idea that you can have a strong, loyal opposition is a problem, not only for the people who are elected to government, but for those who are in opposition. That is, many of those who then become opposition parties, and you see this in Egypt and in Tunisia, some of them want to oppose the current governments there, through the system. But a fair number of others, their attitude is not, well, we work with the process, we may not like, but we'll ride it out for 4 years. The important thing is the process, but rather they will do whatever they can, hoping to bring down that government. They will quietly appeal to the military, or to the security forces. They will, and they do, appeal to the European Union and to the United States. Basically saying, we've got new tyrants. We're the liberals. Support us. Well, some are liberals. Some are what I call illiberal Democrats or illiberal secularists. They're people who belong to the old regime. They may have been Western educated. They may have known how to talk, but the way they walked was to be very close to the regime, very close to the military, you know. So that's what makes for the difficulty in building new, you know, democracies.